I spent 2 weeks flying the Mavic 4 Pro across central Thailand. No sponsors, no free gear. I only wanted to find out if the new lenses, video quality and features actually deliver. And to have a lot of fun, of course. So is it really a creative tool worth the price, or just another drone with better specs? I haven't been using drones much lately, and not because I don't love flying, but because the Air 3 and also newer drones just didn't fit my workflow anymore. But this one got me excited again, so I wanted to take it out on a trip. But let's start from the very beginning, because I wasn't exactly thrilled about spending $3,650 on a drone. But then I walked into the shop, quickly realizing I didn't have to. Now, when I got into the shop, I thought I would buy the most expensive variant, the Creator Combo with the RC Pro 2 controller. And when I saw the controller, I directly took it in my hand and of course I loved it. Like, the screen is awesome, it's big, it's bright, everything you want, feels good. But I also noticed the moment I folded the screen that I felt like way too big to fit into my bag. I mean, of course it would still fit, but there are times where it can get a bit tight, and considering that the drone is already quite a bit bigger than my Air 3 before, I just didn't want to get it. And I also know from experience before, from all I codecs, all intro versus H.265 and H.264 codecs, it's not actually a huge difference. Like before, I think it was on the Fujifilm X-H2S, I compared ProRes, which is an all I codec, to HEVC in 100 Mbits, what I usually shoot on all of my cameras. And I really had to crop into like 400% to see a difference. And that tells me that I also don't need the Creator Combo to get this all-I codec and 512 gigabytes, which is why I ended up not buying the Creator Combo and got the cheaper Fly More Combo instead, and saved, I think it was around $800. And that's why I think that most creators will be perfectly fine with the normal Fly More Combo, maybe even the just standard, just with one battery, because the flight time at like 35 to 40 minutes is actually pretty good. So if you only fly one time per day, or you have 2 or 3 short flights, that might actually be enough as well, and you can save quite a bit of money there. However, I would love to have that feature that you can connect the DJI Mic to the RC Pro 2 controller, because that would allow me sometimes to maybe get some A-roll shots while the drone follows me. I think especially with those tele lenses, which I will come later to, that would actually be a nice one to sync the audio with the drone directly. Thing is, how often would I really use it? Maybe twice a year or so, so it's also not really worth paying $800 more for that, in my opinion. So that's why I only got the Fly More Combo, which was actually a huge relief for my bank account especially. And it also means that all of the footage that you see here from this drone was recorded in H.265 and not in the all-intro codec. And I think it looks great, so it's really not a big issue. And that also leads us to the drone itself, where there are some things that I like and dislike about them, of course. Like at first, when I see the design here, like the gimbal is completely open, so if you crash into something, it is really likely that the gimbal will break instantly, and we've already seen photos of that on the internet. Luckily, it did not happen to me, even if I had a small controlled crash on a boat, but I will come later to that. Anyway, aside from that, it is like typical DJI quality, like it feels really sturdy and good. I also don't think that the open gimbal is that much of a problem, because it has extremely good sensors. Like, I even had situations where I was flying a bit farther away, I didn't really know anything what was there, and it turned out there were some small branches around, and this drone actually stopped. Like, I had drones before, if they're like normal branches of like a centimeter or less, the drone would fly into them, and this drone does not. So I think when it comes to the safety systems included in this drone, and make up for that. But aside from that, what also could be better, of course, is the weight. It's over 1 kilogram. I mean, getting like the paperwork done, especially like if I want to fly in the EU, for example, it wouldn't be that much of a problem. Usually that doesn't take that long. But it's like in your bag. Like, I love going hiking, for example, and even the Air 3 was already not super light, and that is now even more. I'm still fine with it because the quality that I get from all three cameras and the fact that I have three cameras available, I think makes it worth it. But of course, I would prefer if it would be only around 700 to 800 grams. So I wish that when they bring out the Mavic 5 in a few years, that they would focus a bit less on improving the camera this time and just making everything a bit smaller and lighter. But aside from that, I have to say that I love the design of this drone. I mean, the way how it looks like and lies in the air, that's great. And I think that also has to do, of course, with the range and how it behaves in strong wind and stuff. And that was also like, I flew a lot in, let's say, relatively strong winds. It can get stronger, but there was a lot of wind actually, especially when you flew from the boat, and it handled that perfectly. Like, not much shake, definitely, but I also have to say that I never really worried about that because my previous drones, especially the Air 3, but even before, like the Air 2S and the Mavic 3, Mavic 2 Pro and stuff, they all handled wind really well, so that wasn't really something that I specifically looked into. What I was more curious about was the range and how it handles return to home. And when it comes to the range, I have the CE mode here. I don't really find a hack for FCC, so I can't say anything for the Americans here. I expect it to be quite good there, but when it comes to how it flies here in Thailand in CE mode, I found it very similar to the Air 3. Like when I had direct line of sight, usually when I flew over the ocean and stuff, it wasn't a problem at all. But the moment some objects got in between, even like a couple of trees or so, and it was a bit farther away, then you could see that the signal drops quickly. So if you somehow have the option, I would change to FCC. Not giving legal advice here, but if you can somehow, then do it. So I wish it could be a bit improved, but I also know that it's not really DJI's fault because it's just the legalities that you can have a bit more range in the US, but not in Europe and Asia, unfortunately. However, that leads me to the return to home feature, which of course becomes a bit more important when your range is a bit limited in certain scenarios, which was the case when we flew our drones through the arc that you see here. Fun shot, but of course there's always the risk that you lose connection on the other side, and that happened to me on the first try because I tried to fly the Mavic 4 Pro a bit farther away from the cliff on the other side to extend the shot a bit. So of course it lost connection there, but I set my return to home altitude pretty high, of course, before to avoid any potential problems. And I have to say I was pretty surprised there because the drone didn't even go up to the altitude I set for return to home. Instead, it somehow must have recognized before I flew through the cliff or after, I don't know, how high the cliff was, and it flew over it, and it even kept a safe distance to the trees there, and it even showed me on the screen this green line there of the path that it would fly back to me, so I also knew it is safe. And that was important for me because I already had this kind of controlled crash into the boat before, because I flew from the boat and the boat was moving quite a bit from the waves, and so I was not really comfortable hand catching the drone as I would usually do when I fly from boats, so I decided to crash it into the boat so that it at least doesn't fly into the water. And so when I started the drone the second time when I wanted to fly through the arc, I was already a bit worried, and I even ended up landing the drone on the island, swimming to that island and putting the boat on that floating mat that we luckily had with us to bring it back to the boat. So I was a bit scared of doing that again. So scary experience, but I think that's also part of the fun of flying drones. Like otherwise you wouldn't get that adrenaline rush, right? Aside from that, when it comes to flying the drone, it was fine overall, but I did notice sometimes that, especially when I pointed the gimbal down, I think it was, that it sometimes told me that the gimbal reaches its limit or something for a certain flight speed. Like you can't fly like super fast at certain angles of this gimbal. I think it's just like air hits the gimbal and then it would like usually overwhelm the motors or something like that. So I didn't really find it to be a big issue because most of the time you want to get such shots, you're in normal mode or cinematic mode or so, and then it's not really a problem. But yeah, if you want to do certain things in sports mode, you might reach the limitations there. And that leads me to this new 360 rotating gimbal here, Infinity Gimbal, however they call it, which I have to say, I think it's mostly a gimmick because I only really see two ways to use this feature in a good way, at least. That's at first storytelling, like if you want to show that something is off in a shot, then you could tilt the horizon a little to feel the shot itself to be off. And the other way would be in shots like this one here, where you have a strong or big reflection on the bottom from water or whatever, and then you use this feature to get a really nice shot. But honestly, if we see such shots a lot, then it will also get old quickly, so you can't do that too often. So for me, it's more like a gimmick, but I think from a storytelling perspective, it's still good. There's one little remark I have here though, which is that the wide angle lens is 28mm on this drone. Now what I've been thinking about is that when it comes to storytelling, where you want to animate a like horizon tilt animation, in other drones you have 24mm available. So if you animate that, you crop in a little bit and then you change the rotation, and so you would essentially be at around 28mm, maybe 30mm or so of field of view. But on this drone here, like, you could of course do that in camera, so you preserve a bit more quality because you don't have to do it in post and crop in, but therefore you're already at 28mm, which kind of defeats the purpose of that. So I think if you really only want to use that to sometimes use that for storytelling, then you could also use any other drone for it and just crop a little bit in, because with such minor crops you don't really notice the quality difference anyway. So I overall have to say that this is not a feature that would make me purchase the drone. The reason why I purchased this drone is overall the quality improvements, having D-Lock on our cameras, and also the improvements that we've seen, especially on the tele cameras. And that also leads me to the video quality of the Mavic 4 Pro. And talking about the video quality, I already did a quick dynamic range test directly when I got the drone and published it here on YouTube, so I won't repeat that completely, but essentially the result was that it was really close, like about a stop maybe away from my Sony a7C Mark II. So the dynamic range of this drone and overall video quality is really, really good, but it's also not as advertised, the 16 stops of dynamic range that you would at least get with the wide angle lens. I would say, depending on how you interpret the noise levels, it's either about 13 stops, maybe a little more, or if you really take the noise levels into consideration, and maybe 11.5 stops, something in that area, which is definitely good. But what I found a lot more important quality-wise is the tele lenses. Like, even the 6X lens look now really clear and sharp, and it's not just like a gimmick anymore like it was on the Mavic 3 Pro, where the 6X lens also gave you some good shots, but the quality was just not really there. And what I like even more is that you also have really good autofocus available with those lenses, like in terms of creating background blur. And that's what I also noticed really quickly when I shot with this drone, when I got some close-up shots of myself, for example, that especially with the 6X lens, there is so much background blur available that it doesn't feel that much like a small sensor anymore, like what you usually find on drones. And I find that pretty important, because the shots that you can get with the 6X lens definitely make this drone outstanding. And of course, as mentioned already, D-Lock available on all cameras, and I don't mean D-Lock M here, I mean real D-Lock, is actually a big one for me, because as you've probably noticed, I published my videos in HDR, and for HDR color grading, D-Lock M is not good, because the official specifications of the D-Lock M curve are not available. That's why you don't find a color space transform in DaVinci Resolve, for example, and you also don't find any LUTs to convert D-Lock M to HDR colors, which is why I always had to custom color grade my D-Lock M before, which takes a lot of time, and I hate that. And now with D-Lock, I can either just use Resolve Color Management, or I can use Cinematch, or whatever is out there. It always works really good. Of course, Cinematch also kind of worked with D-Lock M, but the results were like not super consistent. Sometimes it was really good, sometimes not. So D-Lock is also definitely better for that. And also a limitation that I noticed, especially with the 6X zoom lens, is if you film things that are really far away in D-Lock, it can easily happen that the image becomes way too flat, which is not really an issue of the drone, because when you film things that are really far away, even like when you shoot a normal camera, then there is oftentimes things like, I don't know, like moisture in the air or something like that, some sort of haze that reduces the contrast of far away things. And that is really hard to capture for camera, so obviously for this drone as well. And now when you then also have D-Lock, that results in a super flat image, which becomes hard to color grade, because when you add contrast back, then it introduces a bit of like artifacting and color noise, just really hard to hold that. That's why I would say that if you have these conditions where you shoot something that's really far away and you notice on your screen already that the contrast is really low, set the drone to either the normal picture profile or to the HDR one, because then you will likely get a bit better image, because then it essentially creates the image from the raw sensor data instead of you creating the image from a log profile later on the computer. In that case, you actually have a bit more information to work with. So in those cases, I would actually make an exception and not use D-Log and use the other picture profiles instead. But for everything else, I would always shoot D-Log. So I think you recognized already that I love the new lenses and also the video quality of this drone overall a lot. But I have to say there is a little quirk. If you really want to color grade a lot by using HSL curves, for example, then I feel like that I introduced color artifacting quite a bit faster on this drone compared to other cameras, especially my Sonys, but also Fujifilm, Canon, etc., what I shot before. I do think that might actually come from having only 10-bit 4:0 instead of 10-bit 4:2. I'm not 100% sure about, because 10-bit 4:2 is usually only important for things like green screen, but it's like my only explanation, because on all my other cameras I do quite often use HSL curves and other features that do similar stuff in DaVinci Resolve especially, and it usually takes a while until I get color artifacting. Of course, even with those cameras, if I push it too hard, it also becomes noticeable, but here it happens quite a bit quicker. So this is really my only gripe with this drone. I think DJI is holding a bit back there, because 10-bit 4:2 HEVC is available pretty much everywhere today, but despite the big price, you only get that on the Mavic 4 if you buy the most expensive combo, and I don't like that. I think it should be in all DJI Mavic 4 drones, especially considering the price. But aside from that, I must also say that overall, when it comes to the video quality, I don't really have to complain anything. Maybe the wide angle lens is not like a day and night step up from the Mavic 3 Pro. It's a slight improvement, but not that noticeable. But on the tele lenses, what they did there is just incredible. Like, it looks so much better now. Oh, and I forgot to mention that the color consistency between all three lenses or cameras is also really good. Like, when I color graded the final cinematic video, I did not really have to shift white balance and tint around in the color grade to match all three cameras. I just kept always the same white balance, like usually 6500 or 5600 Kelvin, while I've been shooting the same on all three lenses all the time. And it looks pretty much the same color-wise in all shots, which I love, because it saves you a lot of time color grading. So that's also nice to see as a little bonus. And you also might be interested in low light, and there I have to disappoint you a little bit, because I generally don't fly drones in low light. It's a bit scary, and I also don't see many use cases aside from getting the occasional city landscape shot. But I did get a random one here right after sunset using the wide angle lens, where big parts of it are pretty much black already. And I have to say, it came out really good. I didn't have to apply noise reduction or so to it, and that tells me that the low light capabilities, at least of the wide angle lens of this drone, are really good, because even there I didn't even expose to the right or so. I just exposed so that it looks good to me on the screen, and that was actually pretty surprising. Okay, so much about the cameras. What I've also been interested in was the smart features, especially the tracking, waypoints and hyperlapses of this drone. And when it comes to tracking, I would overall say it's really good, but I didn't notice any major improvements from my DJI Air 3. But I also have to say that I did not test it by walking through a forest or something like that, because whenever reviewers do that, it doesn't look good, because the drone never moves smooth. It's like always like jumping in between one gap to the next, and therefore you don't really get a smooth cinematic shot. So that's why I never tested like that. For me, it's really just only about how the tracking works. And so overall, tracking, especially with a wide angle lens, was good, just as it was before already for me. Maybe there are minor improvements, but nothing that's really noticeable. However, what I also like is that generally you can also use tracking functionalities with the tele lenses. That is again really good, because you get background blur and all that stuff. That looks great. There is a limitation, of course. You can only use active track with the 2.5x lens, which is good that you can do that, of course, but I wish we could also do that with the 6x lens, because with the 6x you're limited to spotlight, which is still better than nothing, but even there I didn't find it super useful because it doesn't keep me in the exact frame I'm starting in. So for example, in the shot that you see here right now, you see that I'm suddenly in the right side of the frame, but I always wanted to be in the left side, or at least in the center, and it didn't keep me there. And I already tried to walk a bit slower and stuff to make it happen, but it was never perfect. So I wish that DJI could improve the algorithms a bit more to frame a subject perfectly, and ideally also allow us to use at least maybe active track in cinematic mode or so, like really slow with the 6x lens, because I think the shots that we would be able to get in this mode would be insane. And I also tried out the waypoint feature once in this shot here because I couldn't get it otherwise. And this is a feature I feel like that many people don't use often enough, which was also available already on previous drones. And yeah, on this drone, it just works as good as with other drones. I'm not really sure if they improved that a lot, because it's not that I use it like every week or so. I use it maybe a couple of times per year. And I can only say it worked great. Like, I set up the waypoints and I pretty much got the shot instantly. However, what I would suggest DJI as a little improvement is that you also have waypoints available for hyperlapses, which I also tested and worked great. It's a little bit shaky because it was really high wind there. Otherwise, I think the drone would have handled it better. But what I would love to improve there when it comes to hyperlapses is that you should also be able to set waypoints in the normal waypoint mode, save them, and then load them into in the hyperlapse mode. Because right now, as it is, and also with all previous drones before, was that you always have to go into the hyperlapse mode, set the waypoints there, save it, and then go, like I usually land my drone then, change battery, then load it again and do the actual hyperlapse so that I can do the hyperlapse a bit longer. I don't really see a reason why we would not be able of saving the waypoints in the normal waypoint mode and then loading them in the hyperlapse mode. It's not like a big deal because obviously you know it, so if you want to fly a hyperlapse, you will just do it in the hyperlapse mode directly. But I feel like it's a missed opportunity because maybe you want a shot where you transition from a normal video into a hyperlapse, and that is pretty difficult right now because you can't use the exact same waypoints from your normal waypoint mode and the hyperlapse mode. But that's really like the only improvement there. I think waypoints work great, hyperlapse also works really great, and I think you should use this drone more to shoot hyperlapses because you get more battery life. Like, my battery life was around, I would say, 35 to 42 minutes depending on how I flew, how much wind there was, etc. So this is great for hyperlapses. Like before, I think with the Air 3 it was also not bad. It was also a good hyperlapse drone, but I got around half an hour there. And of course, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes more flight time that I can expect, that already helps to shoot me a longer hyperlapse. And that can sometimes in the edit make a huge difference because sometimes you just have to end the hyperlapse where it doesn't really fit. And if you just have a little bit more at the end, it can sometimes help with it. So definitely, if you have this drone, shoot more hyperlapses, you will have a lot of fun with it. Sorry, by the way, my voice is dying today. I don't know why, but I hope it's not too hard to listen to me. I also have a few other thoughts about this drone. At first, when it comes to charging, with the charging up that I have here, I wish they had also included the 240 watts charger in the Fly More combo. It just feels off to put it only in the most expensive one, because it's still that you have to wait quite a bit of time until all batteries are charged. And also, I mean, we're having a Mavic 4 Pro now. It's a pro drone. Clearly the video quality is pro, but it still comes with that small micro SD card. Like, can't we use normal SD cards there, like bigger ones, or even CFast Express Type B or so, like with V90 at least for the SD cards? Because I feel like it's generally that drone shots require a bit more space and therefore it also takes longer to copy them. I wish I had a V90 card in here that everything would just go a little bit quicker. So that's also a wish I would have for an eventual Mavic 5 in the future. Not a big deal, but it would make pro drones feel a bit more Pro. So flying the Mavic 4 Pro on this trip was definitely fun, but what stood out to me on this trip, ironically, wasn't the drone, it was the feeling of flying again, because drones are not just like your usual camera, they offer a different perspective of course, but what's even more important is that they make the whole process of creating and even just being outside more fun. Like, you know, flying through gaps, trying new shots, and the thrill of never really knowing if you get it back. It brought back that feeling of just playing around like when you first got into the stuff. I love it. Now, in terms of performance, the Mavic 4 Pro is the best drone you can get right now. All lenses are sharp and detailed. The 6x lens delivers real compression and depth, and D-Log across all three lenses finally makes color grading workflows consistent and HDR compatible. If you really need all of this is another question, of course. I think if you're a working professional, the creator combo with the RC Pro 2 and all-eye codec can make a lot of sense. Even just the controller makes you look more pro in front of your clients, what sounds stupid, but can mean that clients feel better about working with you. And as a general content creator like myself, I think the standard of fly more combos are more than enough. And if you're vlogging or shooting simple travel and lifestyle content, the Air 3, Air 3S or Mini 4 will still get you plenty of quality, and they are definitely a bit more travel friendly than the quite chunky Mavic 4 Pro here, which is not precisely light. So I wouldn't upgrade in that case, but if the Mavic 4 Pro makes sense for you, you likely want to see more footage from this drone, and you might be curious how this drone stacks up to a full frame camera. For that, check out these two videos here. There you see most of the footage I got with this drone, and also a little comparison to my Sony a7C Mark II in terms of dynamic range. And if you have any questions about this drone, let me know in the comments below. I can answer them directly, and I'm also planning to make a tutorial about it.